So welcome to this bonus episode of Shine On Policycast, where we share 5 numbers in 5 minutes to update you about the latest in the solar market in Europe. I'm Bethany, and today I'm joined by Christophe Lits, our market analyst at SolarPower Europe. So hi, Christophe.
Hey, Bethany.
So we've just recently launched the latest version of our EU Solar Jobs Report. I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. For those of you not watching on video, we have a lovely new yellow hourglass timer. So Christophe, what are your 5 key numbers to take away from this report in 5 minutes? Off you go.
Thank you. So I got some time pressure now on. But no, I think maybe the first number I would like to give is actually the amount of people working in the EU, just to give some context to everyone watching. So first number I'll say is about 830,000 people. That's the amount that are people that are working in the solar sector in the EU, covering both direct and indirect jobs. So that's really the whole picture. And when we're talking about those jobs, we're looking at 4 categories, which is the deployment, the O&M, so which is operation and maintenance, so basically cleaning the panels and making sure everything is fine. The manufacturing section, so creating the panel, and then the recycling of the panel. So first number is really how many people work in the EU, 830,000 people. And then if you look at those different categories, so in EU we have quite a skewed market toward deployment. So if you look at all of those people working, it's almost 90% of the workers are working in deployment phase of PV. So what we consider being deployment, it's actually pretty broad. It includes everything from putting panel on the grounds, putting panel on the roofs, but also the design of the system, so the engineer behind, the procurement scheme, the supply chain to buy the panel. So all of those is actually considering as deployment. And since the EU is really skewed toward installing a lot of panel, but not creating so much yet, we have a lot of workers concentrated in that segment. So second number, 90% of the people focusing on the deployment sector. Then if I have to mention a third number, it actually will be on the manufacturing segmentation. So how many people work on manufacturing? And that's about 33,000, so a bit more than 43,000 people, so a bit more than 40,000 people, which is only 5% of the total EU solar workforce. And I think that's a key number to remember also, because that's where there's a lot of progress we can make, both in terms of manufacturing to secure, to increase the energy security of the EU, but there's also a lot of room for workers there. So that's something that we can really improve. So that's 5% of the total jobs are manufacturing. And then if we move to my fourth number I'll mention is something that's pretty interesting. So the PV market is really segmented between utility scale, so those are ground-mounted PV, really the large farm that we put on the ground, and then we have the rooftop PV, so the solar panel you see on the roof of the house or buildings or apartments or shops or whatever. And here's actually pretty interesting, and I'm looking at the time to see
You're doing
how
okay.
good I'm okay. I think I'm doing okay.
2.5 minutes left. You're fine.
Yeah, so
Take
I'm
your
totally
time.
fine. So, and then if we look throughout the EU, the share between ground-mounted PV and rooftop PV is about 70% of workers works in rooftop PV segment, whereas 30% are working on utility scale segment. So that's the average throughout the EU as a general, but there's a lot of variation between countries to countries depending on what policy are in place and what specific support scheme you have from for PV in general. So we're seeing countries like Italy and Romania, for example, which will be much more skewed toward rooftop PV. For example, in Italy, we had the Super Bonus scheme. In Romania, we have the Casa Verde program, which are both programs really aiming at supporting rooftop PV. And there in those countries, we're seeing a share that's almost as high as 90% of PV is installed on roof, really. And then we have the exact opposite. For example, some countries like Spain, and Spain is almost notable an exception in the EU, is that most of the installations, almost 70% of the installation in Spain, is built on ground, so on large PV farm. This also explained because the country has, first, a lot of space compared to some other country. It's a very sunny country, so there's a lot of actually interest to build there. So it's much more interesting to build on ground than on roofs. So it's about, that's the fourth number, 70% is on rooftop. We're still expecting this share to actually decrease in the longer run. So in the next 5 years, we're expecting this 70 to decrease more towards 60%, and then 40% will be on the utility scale. And then my last number, as I see the time runs almost out, so is looking in the longer term, like how many people do we expect to work in the solar sector? So today we have 830,000, that was my first number. And in the next 5 years, we're expecting to go slightly above 1.1 million worker. So it means we still need to find about 3,000 to 4,000 people in the industry by the next 5 years. It's a bit of decrease from what we had in a previous report, if people have read it. So we were expecting to have 1 million people in 2025. Now that has decreased a little bit. We're expecting in 2027, which reflects a little bit the bumps in the market deployment that we've seen, especially at the end of 2023 and now in 2024 with the end of the energy crisis. So we still need some way to go, and about 1 million people by 2027 and 1.1 in 2028. And that makes exactly 5 minutes.
Perfect, just in time. Thanks, Christophe. So yeah, those are some key numbers. We've got 830,000 people working in Europe. In solar, 90% of them are concentrated in deployments. Around 5% are working in manufacturing. 70% are working specifically in deployment on rooftop PV. And we expect 1.1 million workers by 2028 now, rather than 2025. Because yes, the market is facing some slowdowns. It's still growing, but slower than maybe we expected, which is maybe not to be so much of a surprise after the energy crisis. But for all these numbers and more, you can find it on our EU Solar Jobs Report on the SolarPower Europe website. Thanks so much, Christophe, for the report and for all your numbers today.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I hope the readers will enjoy the report. So thanks.